In the oldest and deepest memories of the earth, the existence of certain lives is itself an immovable gray mountain. Possessing a colossal, texturized body heavier than dozens of full-grown elephants combined, every single step of his 37-meter frame sent long, silent vibrations deep into the strata. Yet, this supreme terrestrial titan, who possessed the raw power to easily reshape floodplains, left no brutal marks of combat in his final days. On a vast and silent ancient plain, he merely laid down slowly and with ultimate gentleness, surrendering to the earth's gravity. Tonight, by the faintly flickering hearth, let us step into his true life with this story that requires no effort to remember. In the cold archives of paleontological bone fossils, Pasha the Patagotitan usually represents nothing more than a series of astonishing measurements of a massive femur meters long. But in the true night of the mid-Cretaceous, a time filled with violent crustal tearing and the savage fangs of predators, Pasha survived with a detachment that transcended the world. This is not a cold encyclopedia of dominance and bloody plunder, but a midnight echo of how to find ultimate tranquility within extreme weight, bringing a grounding sense of descent to the world before darkness falls. 100 million years ago, the Patagonian plains were undergoing a long, silent seasonal shift, the air forever filled with the slightly dry, earthy fragrance born of rising geothermal heat. It was the golden age of the titanosaurs, where countless colossal lives thrived across this vast land, stamping out long paths toward distant water sources with their heavy feet. Pasha stood at the very pinnacle of this world governed by absolute mass, his massive form like a softly contoured gray mountain rising abruptly from the earth. His skin was as rugged as cracked ancient bark, covered in small, hardened horny scuts and thick wrinkles left behind by the washing of time. The first turning point of destiny was driven by a rare volcanic ash storm that swept across the continent, withering the vast redwood forests that had sheltered the clan for decades. The drastic shrinking of living space plunged the once peaceful herbivorous herds into a tightly wound power struggle overnight, their internal harmony collapsing entirely under panic and hunger. Young, ambitious male titans clashed frantically in the center of the plains to fight for the last remaining green canopies, the dull crunch of fracturing bones echoing through the wilderness day after day. Pasha watched all of this in silence. He saw his once comrades shatter their beautiful scales in mutual slaughter, their blood staining the withered moss, the tension turning the entire plain into a cage of anxiety. As a guardian, he could have easily swung his long, whip-like tail to join that brutal game of power, crushing all provocateurs into dust in an instant. Yet there was not a single trace of the era's frenzy in his eyes. They were deep, clear, and carried a touch of otherworldly black serenity. At that moment, a certain primeval wisdom awoke deep within Pasha, not the urge to fight, but a profound weariness and restraint toward endless plundering. He did not meet the jealous, intimidating glare of the old clan leader, nor did he attempt to build an empire of vanity. Instead, beneath a blood-red sunset, he turned his massive body with agonizing slowness. Stepping upon the cracked red soil, he moved like a gray stone sculpture drifting slowly through time. Without a single look back, he walked away from that frantic territory, step by step, toward the desolate and quiet unknown wilderness. Leaving the shelter of the clan meant Pasha had to face the apex predators of the dark night alone, such as the Giganotosaurus lurking on the edges of the plain. On such an open wasteland without the camouflage of dense forests, any sharp turn born of panic would cause Pasha's multi-ton skeleton to fracture instantly under its own crushing weight. This was a restraint disciplined by absolute mass, yet Pasha stubbornly carried his slow pace into his very bones, living as a profound enigma that left predators with nowhere to strike. He walked so slowly, with each step, his pillar-like forelimbs paused in the air for several seconds before his wide feet pressed into the dry sand, releasing a dull, drawn-out, and deeply therapeutic rustling sound. His posture did not resemble a retreat, but rather an act of using his body to stroke and feel every pulse of the earth. This slowness, ironically, created a beautiful resonance between him and the environment. The long trek accumulated deep soreness in his joints, and within his long respiratory tract, a low rumble echoed like a great wind blowing through a hollow cavern. With every inhalation, the warm, clean air swirled within his vast chest. With every exhalation, he seemed to breathe out the day's fatigue into the star-filled sky. This breathing possessed an irresistible, hypnotic magic. It was so stable that countless small herbivorous dinosaurs, tense and searching for shelter as night fell, slowed their panicked escape upon hearing his footsteps. Nesting in mud hollows, they pressed their ears to the damp ground, listening quietly to the safest vibrations brought by the behemoth. They knew that as long as the master of the plains paced so calmly, no absolute crisis could threaten their lives. Pasha noticed those tiny creatures hiding in the dark, but he did not lower his head. He merely drew a gentle arc in the air with his long tail, brushing through the cold mist, measuring an invisible boundary of peaceful sleep for all weak lives on Earth. In the narrow eyes of a world that worships the law of the jungle, symbols of power usually belong to predators with sharp teeth and claws who tear the night with roars. Yet, those arrogant carnivores showed a near-humble rationality when truly facing Pasha, for he embodied a silent, mountain-like majesty that transcended the logic of combat. In his 5th year of living alone on this desolate plain, on a midnight when a rainstorm was brewing, danger inevitably pierced the defense of the night and descended upon Pasha's resting place. 2 massive giganotosaurids, driven mad by prolonged hunger, followed the faint scent of life and slithered through the mud to the edge of the riverbed where Pasha rested. It was a piercing moment where the entire plain seemed to freeze. From the predator's gaping jaws, lined with coarse backward denticles, thick, foul saliva dripped onto the rocks with faint scraping noises, facing a terrifying ambush that would shatter the souls of any smaller species. Pasha displayed a near-sacred calmness. He did not even turn his massive body, but merely raised his long neck with absolute composure. As his 37-meter frame fully unfurled beneath the moonlight, the drifting clouds in the sky seemed to become his shawl. He looked down, gazing at the 2 tiny carnivores beneath his feet with a detached expression that had seen through life, death, and the flow of deep time. Then, Pasha executed his most restrained defense, merely utilizing the momentum of a slight shift in his center of gravity. He gently swept his ridge-like tail, the tip cutting the air and creating a low, thunderous roar. The blast of wind and flying stones instantly forced the leading predator back several meters, the flying gravel slamming into its hollow belly with a heavy thud. Without any redundant entanglement, and without a single angry roar, Pasha just stood there in silence. The aura he exuded, completely integrated with nature, was like an invisible wall, locking away all greed and frenzy. After confronting each other for a full half-hour, the madness in the eyes of the 2 cunning predators was gradually replaced by despondency. Finally, under Pasha's serene presence, where his breathing did not falter by even a single fraction, they lowered their heads and melted step by step into the deep shadows of the night. With the danger dissolved, midnight on the wasteland welcomed its most sacred and tender hour. The heavy clouds dissolved completely, revealing the ancient starry sea above, so dense it could draw tears. The mid-Cretaceous sky was filled with unknown infinity, as colossal emerald nebulas spun slowly in the deep dark, casting down a soft, healing celestial glow. While cold air howled over the wilderness, within the center of this hidden, flat basin, the temperature remained as cozy and constant as a natural nest. Pasha completely dropped his guard, beginning a deeply immersive, relaxing pre-sleep ritual inside this sanctuary meant for him alone. It was a life ritual unique to the Patagotitan. Starting from the tip of his tail, vertebra by vertebra, he slowly relaxed the massive muscle groups that had been tense all day. He adjusted his posture gradually, lowering his heavy, exhausted belly, stiffened from the long trek and the recent confrontation, inch by inch toward the ground. He bent his thick, column-like legs, allowing his massive chest to first make contact with the soft red soil, which had absorbed ample geothermal heat during the day and still radiated a gentle warmth. At that moment, the residual heat gifted by the sun, accumulated within the earth all day, began to seep into him like warm spring water along the softer textures of Pasha's belly. The warmth penetrated his thick subcutaneous fat, wrapped around his tense muscle fibers, and rapidly spread to every joint dulled by long travel, dispelling the sticky anxieties within his body. Next, with a near slow-motion elegance, he laid his dozen-meter neck smoothly along the ground, resting his head softly in a basalt groove rounded perfectly by the ages. This warmth from within, paired with the Earth's gravity, held an irresistible, hypnotic power. It was so stable that Pasha no longer felt like a wandering refugee upon the earth, but rather the most essential raw gemstone belonging to this soil and this wilderness. The night pressed the mute button on the ancient storms. The rustle of the wind through distant treetops softened into the most soothing white noise. Cradled by this solid cocoon of safety provided by the earth, Pasha's eyelids grew as heavy as mountains, his consciousness drifting away in the warm embrace, dissolving into a gentle, velvety void. The end of life arrived quietly and elegantly. For Pasha, it was merely the most peaceful and enchanting evening among countless deeply comfortable nights. It was an ordinary end to a dry season in the mid-Cretaceous, the air sweet with the faint caramel aroma of drying plants, while thousands of gentle meteors streaked across the dark sky. Pasha was too old, so old that the massive blood pump within his chest could no longer consistently send warm blood to the ends of his 37-meter body, and each breath required enduring the calcified grinding sound deep in his chest. Yet he showed no panic of finality. On that star-studded night, he simply returned to the center of the warm red flat plain that had accompanied most of his life, laying down slowly in his most familiar posture. He cradled his tired head gently within the stone groove, the soil's texture coarse and warm, offering him the ultimate psychological support and reconciliation he had never experienced in his life. He began to completely relax his long spine, which had been tensed for so long against the world's prejudice, letting the Earth's gravity soothe his entire frame for one last time. As the warm gravity took full custody of his skeleton, his multi-ton colossal body completed its final descent under layers of red earth and fine sand, exhaling the last deep, long sigh of his life. The breath condensed into a giant white mist in the cool air, drifting slowly toward the open floodplain, merging into the cosmos without a single shred of regret. The surrounding wilderness fell into absolute stillness in an instant. The night wind died down, the dust ceased to clamor, and even the ancient cicadas that loved to sing at night folded their wings, as if witnessing together the eternal sleep of an earthly elder. Pasha closed his eyes completely, the moonlight tracing his ridge-like gray-back armor, turning him into the most serene and everlasting rock statue upon this ancient plain. 100 million years passed like an invisible torrent, washing over every corner of the continent, leveling the volcanic fields and transforming the flourishing floodplains into today's red rock deserts. Enveloped by layers of silt and time, Pasha's mountain-like armor underwent mineralized change. Eventually, every massive vertebra and heavy rib fused perfectly with the cold stone, becoming part of the Earth's own skeleton. Because he died in absolute peace, undisturbed by predators, when the joint archaeological team gently brushed away the last layer of red soil 100 million years later, every scholar present was stunned by the breathtaking completeness of the fossil. It was flawlessly preserved, the textures of the colossal femur and the entire spinal line were crystal clear, the body still maintaining that healing posture of relaxing on the plain, perfect as a gray deity that had just fallen asleep at midnight. The world marveled in scientific papers at the milestone significance of this fossil in evolutionary history, defining his existence with staggering numbers and analyzing his weight-bearing structure. Yet few could pierce through those cold academic terms to see the mid-Cretaceous night, filled with the Earth's residual warmth, that had once comforted Pasha's entire life. True strength never needs to prove itself through roars and slaughter, it is always contained within the deepest quiet and self-restraint, much like this long lullaby Pasha wrote with his entire life. Now, you too might be lying in a sanctuary of your own, free from the storms of the Cretaceous and the mundane chaos that brings you tension and anxiety. Those daytime trivialities that left you exhausted and perplexed are, before the boundless river of time, nothing more than an insignificant grain of sand on the plain, not worth sacrificing your sleep for. The earth will cradle your tired body with the gentlest gravity and endless night, just as it accepted Pasha tens of millions of years ago, washing away all your unease and tension. Your bed radiates a pleasant warmth, and your soft duvet offers the coziest embrace, mirroring that warm Patagonian soil that safely received Pasha eons ago. Drop all defenses and weight from your heart, listen to this story that requires no effort to remember, and let your slow, deep, and measured breathing carry you away. Slowly, close your eyes. Good night, Pasha the Patagonian, good night, to every soul shedding its heavy armor tonight, returning to a mountain-like peace.